Hello everyone. So the fairy tale we're going to look at today is a very old story. This one can be traced back something like 4,000 years, so it's really old. And one of the reasons why it's maybe survived so long is it talks about what it's like to be human. We know that humans are not perfect, we all make mistakes. And the characters in this story certainly do that. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever made a promise that you have later regretted? How about this? Have you ever boasted to somebody and said something that isn't true? If you have, you'll maybe understand the characters in this story. The story is about a miller. Now, a miller back then is a person who grinds grain into flour, and they would have been quite poor. One day, he is called before the king, somebody of very high status, and he loses it a bit. He says something that isn't true. It would be like us nowadays meeting somebody very famous, or someone that we really admire, or maybe even our queen. Are you sure that your brain would work? Are you sure that you would say something sensible? I'm not sure that I would. If you feel like me that you maybe would make a mistake too, perhaps you'll understand the characters in this story. So the story we're looking at is one of the ones in the Grimm's Brothers collection, and it's called Rumpelstiltskin. If you're ready, I will begin. One day, a poor miller was called before the king. He said, I have a beautiful daughter who can spin straw into gold. This was not the truth. The miller was trying to impress the king. Well, that's a useful talent to have, the king said. Bring your daughter to the palace tomorrow. Okay, so let's have a think about that. So here's some straw. Would it really be possible to spin straw into gold? You don't think so? Nor do I. And do you think the king really believed that the daughter could do that? Or was he just calling his bluff? Let's wait and see. The next day, the king took the miller's daughter to a room filled with straw, a spinning wheel and a spindle. Before he locked the door, he said, "Get to work. If you haven't spun this straw into gold by tomorrow morning, I'll lock you in the castle prison." The miller's daughter burst into tears. "What am I going to do?" she said. "I don't know how to spin straw into gold." Just then, a gnome appeared. "Oh, little girl, why are you crying?" The girl told him what her father had said and what the king had ordered. "Is that all?" the gnome said. "What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you?" She thought for a moment. "My necklace." "Very well." The gnome sat down and quickly spun all the straw into gold, and then he disappeared. The next morning the king unlocked the door and saw all the gold. His greedy eyes widened. There was a lot of gold, but he knew a king could always do with more gold. He took the miller's daughter to a bigger room that was filled with even more straw. "You have until tomorrow morning to spin this gold into straw, or else," he said. The girl was frightened and started to cry. The gnome appeared again. "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?" The miller's daughter said, "This ring on my finger." "Very well," the gnome said, and he sat down to spin the straw into gold. The next morning the king was happy to see all the gold, but this was still not enough. He took the poor miller's daughter to an even bigger room filled with even more straw. "If you spin the straw into gold by the morning, I will make you my queen," he said. "But if you don't, I will lock you away forever." When the king had gone, the gnome appeared. "What will you give me to spin the straw into gold?" he asked. The miller's daughter replied, "I have nothing left to give." "If you promise to give me your firstborn child once you become queen, I will spin all the straw into gold for you," the gnome said. Well, who knows what will happen between now and then, the miller's daughter thought. No one would actually make a mother give away her child, would they? And so she agreed, desperate to have the gold to please the king. The gnome soon spun the straw into gold. The next morning, the king discovered yet another room filled with gold thread. He was so pleased that he arranged the wedding ceremony and the feast for the very next day. A year later, the new queen had a healthy baby. She had forgotten all about her promise to the gnome. When he suddenly appeared, asking her to keep her promise, she became very upset. "I can give you all the treasures in the world, but please let me keep my child," the Queen begged him. "All the treasures in the world were not what you promised. They were not what I want," said the gnome. She started to cry and he felt pity for her. "All right, if you can guess my name, I will let you keep your baby. I will give you 3 days to do so." All night long, the Queen made list upon list of names. She asked all around the kingdom for names that she might have forgotten. The gnome arrived the next day, wanting to hear the Queen tell him his name. She started reciting names: Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar. After she said every name on her list, the gnome said, "No, you have not said my name. I will be back tomorrow." The Queen asked even more people for new names on her list. When the gnome came the next day, she asked if his name was Ribfiend or Mutton Chops or Spindleshanks. She tried the most unusual names she could think of, but each time she said, he replied, "No, that's not my name. I will be back tomorrow." Well, now the Queen was getting desperate. She had sent messengers to every corner of the kingdom. She had to figure out this little gnome's name. One of the messengers returned on the 3rd day with some news. He said, "I came around the bend in the forest and saw a funny little hut. In it was an odd little man dancing around the fire. He said a little rhyme as he went. 'Tomorrow I will brew, today I will bake. Soon the child will be mine to take. Oh, what luck to win this game. Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'" "Oh, thank you," she said to the messenger, and rewarded him handsomely. The gnome appeared and she asked him, "Is your name Conrad?" "That's not my name," he said, a sly little smile creeping onto his face. "How about Harry?" "No," he said. "Could it possibly be Rumpelstiltskin?" The little gnome was shocked. "How did you find out?" he shouted. "How did you know?" He stomped his little foot and shook his fists, but it made no difference. The Queen had won the game. Rumpelstiltskin left the palace and was never seen again. The end. So, what do you think the moral of this story was? Perhaps it might be you need to think before you speak. I think all of us need to remember that one. Sixth formers, what do you think about the way the characters were portrayed? What do you think of the king? Did he really think that she'd be able to spin straw into gold? What do you think about the way he behaved once he found out she could? And what about the threats? Was any of his behaviour okay? Was any of it understandable? And how about the miller's daughter? She made a promise she had no intention of keeping. What do you think of that? Did she have a choice? Is she still responsible for her actions? And how about the miller? He lost it for just one moment when he was in front of the king. Should he be held responsible for what he did? Make some notes. We'll talk about them when you get back into school. Okay, guys, I shall see you soon. Bye for now.